The year is 1893. The world, or at least the future of it, has gathered in Chicago. Thomas Flynn felt the city's pulse, a frantic hammering rhythm beneath the soles of his boots. He despised it. He'd come from the clean, geometric certainty of railroad steel and structural blueprints, a world where logic was king. Chicago, in the fever grip of its world's Columbian exposition, was a chaotic asylum. The pristine white city of the fair shimmered on the horizon, a magnificent lie of plaster and staff, while the real Chicago festered around it in a miasma of coal smoke, stockyard blood, and desperation. Thomas was a man of perpendicular lines in a city of dizzying curves. He was tall, spare, and wore his precision like an ill-fitting suit. It was this rigidity, his former Pinkerton supervisor had called it, that had seen him dismissed. "You see the trap, Flynn," his boss had grumbled, "but you forget the man baiting it." Now, that very rigidity was the only tool he had left. He stood opposite the building on Wallace Street. It was an ugly, three-story brick monstrosity, an architectural tumor squatting in a neighborhood of honest decay. The sign, painted in optimistic swirls, read, "World's Fair Hotel." Its owner, a charismatic doctor named H. Holmes, was reportedly a pillar of the community. Thomas knew better. He knew what men of grand vision and no oversight were capable of. He was here for Alice. His sister, brilliant and recklessly ambitious, had seen the fair as her chance. A freelance journalist, she'd meant to capture the shadow of the White City. Her letters had been full of electric light, towering marvels, and the kinetic energy of the crowds. Then, a week ago, they had changed. They spoke of her hotel, of the strange, affable Dr. Holmes. Her last, brief note, delivered by post 2 days too late, had been frantic. He'd arrived this morning and gone straight to her rented room. The door was locked. He didn't bother with the proprietor. He'd spent 3 years designing unpickable locks for bank vaults. The flimsy tumbler on Alice's door was an insult. It yielded to his tension wrench and rake in under 4 seconds. The room was neat, too neat. Her luggage was by the bed, her clothes folded. A setup, a performance for a worried relative. Thomas, the engineer, saw what a normal man would miss. He saw the geometry. The room was not square. The dimensions, paced out, were 2 feet shorter than the building's exterior brickwork should allow. He got on his hands and knees, his fingers tracing the seams of the floorboards. Near the wall, one board had a telltale springiness. He used the flat edge of his wrench to pry it up. Beneath it lay Alice's reporter's notebook. His blood, usually so temperate, went cold. He read her frantic, sloping script. Asterisk. He's a chameleon. Charming. Bought me dinner. Spoke of medicine and progress. But his eyes. God. His eyes. They are not kind. They are anatomical. A surgeon's eyes. Asterisk. Thomas flipped a page. The writing was shakier. Asterisk. The walls are changing. I'm not mad. I went to sleep and the door was on the left wall. I woke up. It was on the right. No, that's impossible. It's the hallway. The hallway is different. The stairs, they don't go to the same place. I measured. The landing on the 2nd floor is 3 feet wider than it was yesterday. Asterisk. He knew instantly what this meant. This wasn't a hotel. It was a machine. The last entry was a single smeared sentence. Asterisk. There is no 3rd floor. I am on the 3rd floor. There is no 3rd floor. He's coming. Room 341. He knows. Asterisk. Thomas closed the book. The trap was set. The bait was his sister, and the man who set it had forgotten one thing. He had baited it for an engineer. Thomas didn't use the grand carpeted staircase. He found the service stairs, a narrow, splinter-filled passage reeking of lye and stale food. He moved with a practiced economy of motion. The lockpick set a cool weight in his coat pocket. He was not a fighter. He was a dismantler. The second floor was a labyrinth. As he emerged from the stairwell, he found himself in a hallway that seemed to defy Euclid. It was too narrow, and the gaslights were spaced at irregular intervals, creating pools of disorienting shadow. Doors lined both walls, dozens of them, far more than the building's footprint could possibly accommodate. He moved to the nearest door, marked 214. He placed his ear against the wood. Silence. He tried the knob. Locked. He slid his pick into the keyhole, felt the pins, and frowned. There were no pins. The keyhole was a solid, milled piece of brass, a fake. He moved to the next door. 216. Also a fake. 218. 220. He ran his hand along the wallpaper between them, pressing. Solid brick. This wasn't a hallway. It was a stage. A killing floor designed to look like a hallway. A faint sound, a man's nervous cough, echoed from the far end. Thomas flattened himself into an alcove, his hand on his wrench. A man emerged from the gloom, carrying a stack of soiled linens. He was thin, with a perpetually worried expression and a weak, straw-colored mustache. He jumped when he saw Thomas. "Lord, you startled me," the man wheezed, dropping a sheet. "Guests ain't supposed to be in this wing. Dr. Holmes, he's very particular." "I'm looking for my sister," Thomas said, his voice flat. "Alice Flynn, room 341. The man's face, already pale, went the color of old tallow. He licked his lips. 341? There's no... Sir, you should leave. This isn't a good place. Where is she?" The man flinched at the cold authority in Thomas's voice. I don't know. I just clean. I'm Benjamin Petezel. I'm the carpenter, mostly." "And the janitor." He looked left and right, his eyes darting like trapped birds. He leaned in, his breath sour. "He's a devil, sir. A true devil. I saw him, with a young woman, earlier. He took her up. Up? To the third floor? Yes, but you can't use the guest stairs. He watches them. From his office. He has peepholes. Wires." Petezel grabbed Thomas's sleeve. "But there's another way. A dumbwaiter. I can show you. I have to. I have to do something. I have a family. I can't let this. Please, sir, quickly." Thomas studied the man. He was sweating, trembling. He was the perfect picture of a terrified, decent man pushed too far. He was also a liar. Thomas knew the type. The Pinkertons were full of them. Men who played the victim, the informant, the bystander, all to mask their own complicity. But Petezel was also his only way forward. "Show me," Thomas said. Petezel led him through a maze of back corridors, the air growing staler, hotter. The very construction of the building felt malicious. Doorways were set at odd heights, forcing a man to stoop. Floors slanted imperceptibly, guiding the walker toward unseen center points. "In here," Petezel whispered, pushing open a door to what looked like a large linen closet. Thomas stepped inside. Petezel followed, shutting the door behind them. The room was small, perhaps 6 feet square. "The dumbwaiter is behind this panel," Petezel said, fumbling with a section of the wall. Thomas wasn't looking at the panel. He was looking at the ceiling, at the walls. They were not plaster. They were tin, painted over. And the door, he now saw, was not wood. It was steel, clad in a thin oak veneer. The edges were gasketed with rubber. He smelled it an instant before he heard it. A faint, oily scent, like bitter almonds. He heard the click times of the latch. Not from Petezel's fumbling, but from times outside times the room. A heavy, mechanical times thunk asterisk. Simultaneously, a soft hiss began. It came from a small, perforated nozzle in the ceiling. Pitezel's eyes went wide, not in surprise, but in pure animal terror. He promised, he stammered, clawing at the door. He promised me. Gas, Thomas said. He didn't waste breath on shouting. He grabbed Pitezel by his shirt front and slammed him against the wall. How long? I don't know. A minute. 2. Oh God, my kids, my poor kids. Pitezel slumped, sobbing. He was testing me, Thomas snarled, his mind racing. He released Pitezel and threw himself at the door. It was solid, a bank vault door in disguise. He examined the lock mechanism. There was none on the inside. The hissing grew louder. The almond smell was overwhelming. Thomas's lungs were already beginning to burn. Pitezel was on the floor, weeping. Thomas looked at the ceiling, the nozzle. He looked at the floor, the walls. Sealed. An airtight box. Asterisk. No. Asterisk. He dropped to his knees, pressing his face to the floorboards. Asterisk. There. Asterisk. A 1/4-inch gap beneath the door. Air. He put his mouth to the crack, dragging in a thin, precious stream of dusty air from the hallway. The floor! He yelled at Pitezel. Get on the floor! Breathe the crack! Pitezel didn't move, just rocked and moaned. Useless. Thomas lay flat, his mind a crystalline engine of logic. The gas was cyanide or something similar. Lighter than air? No. It seemed to be filling the room evenly. But the pressure to force the gas times in asterisk. Air must be allowed times out asterisk. He crawled along the wall, his fingers probing. And he found it. A small grated vent near the floor, almost identical to the intake nozzle. It was sucking air times out asterisk, creating a deadly circulation. He couldn't block the intake. But the outtake. He pulled his heavy wrench from his coat. The grate was bolted. He didn't have time. He jammed the handle of the wrench times into times the grate, leveraging it against the tin wall. He put his boot on it, and times stomped asterisk. The metal screeched. The grate bent, but didn't break. The room was fogging. Thomas's vision was tunneling. He felt a strange, light-headed euphoria. He stomped again. Asterisk. Crack. Asterisk. The grate tore free, but it wasn't enough. The hole was too small. He looked at Pitezel. The man was a dead weight. Thomas ripped the soiled linens. Pitezel had been carrying, stuffing them into his own coat. He clawed at Pitezel's jacket, ripping it from his unresisting body. He jammed the clothes, his own coat, the linens, everything he had, into the outtake vent, packing it tight, creating a plug. The hissing from the ceiling nozzle strained, rising in pitch. The pressure built. The gas had nowhere to go. Asterisk, pop asterisk. A rivet on the ceiling nozzle shot out, striking the far wall. Then another. With a sudden times whoosh asterisk, the intake nozzle reversed its flow, a fog of poison blasting times back up the pipe times as the pressure equilibrium failed. The Hissat NG stopped. Thomas lay on the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs, sucking in the dusty air from the hallway crack. He was alive. After a full minute, he heard a heavy bolt slide back on the other side. The door opened. Dr. H.H. Holmes stood framed in the doorway. He was handsome, impeccably dressed, with a dark, well-groomed mustache and eyes that held a chilling blue-white clarity. He was not surprised or angry. He looked delighted. "Mr. Flynn," he said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone. "What a pleasure. Mr. Pitezel, you are a dreadful disappointment. You were supposed to remove the linens, an uncontrolled variable. Holmes stepped into the room, nudging the near catatonic Pitezel with a polished shoe. "Get up, Benjamin. Take this. Failure. To the basement. It seems he requires a more practical demonstration." Pitezel scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of broken terror. "Yes, Doctor. At once, Doctor." "No," Thomas said, getting to his feet. He was dizzy, but his voice was iron. "I'm not going anywhere with him." Holmes smiled. "Oh, I'm afraid you are. You see, Mr. Flynn, your sister is in the basement, and the air down there is becoming rather thin. You are, after all, a man who appreciates the mechanics of a vacuum." He gestured into the hallway. "After you. I'm so very eager to see what you do next." The game had changed. Holmes was no longer just the architect. He was the games master, and he had just invited Thomas to the final board. Pitezel, moving like a sleepwalker, led Thomas to a section of the hallway that was just wrong. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing raw brick. At the end, there was no door, only a hole. A chute. The chute for deliveries, Pitezel stammered, avoiding Thomas's eyes. "He has your family, doesn't he?" Thomas said, not as a question. Pitezel just nodded, his body shaking. He said he'd let them go. If I tested you for him. He likes to watch. He likes to see how things come apart." "And you believed him?" Thomas looked into the black, greasy maw of the chute. It smelled of lime and something sweet, like spoiled meat. "He's a man of science," Pitezel whispered, a desperate, insane hope in his voice. "He keeps his word. He's a butcher. Get out of my way." Thomas didn't wait to be pushed. He sat on the edge, gripped the sides, and slid into the darkness. The chute was steep, a jolting, terrifying ride in pitch black. He slid for what felt like 100 feet, the metal slick with some unknown filth, before he was spat out onto a hard stone floor. He landed in a crouch. The air here was cold, damp, and thick with a cocktail of vile odors. Chemicals, coal smoke, quicklime, and beneath it all, the coppery tang of old blood. He was in the cellar. He stood, letting his eyes adjust. Dim light filtered in from a single, high, grated window. The space was enormous, a subterranean nightmare of brick and mortar. In one corner, he saw a massive industrial-scale furnace, its iron door as tall as a man. In another, a long wooden table stained dark, lined with surgical tools that glinted in the gloom. Pipes, thick as a man's arm, snaked across the ceiling and walls, all converging on a complex manifold of wheels and levers. This was the building's dark heart. "The control room! Alice!" he yelled. His voice was swallowed by the stone, but he heard it. A faint rhythmic times thump 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 asterisk. He followed the sound, moving past vats of acid and piles of lime-dusted earth to the far corner. There, set into the wall, was a door. It was not a door to a room. It was the door to a bank vault. Heavy, circular, with a combination wheel and a small, thick glass porthole. He ran to it. Inside, in the darkness, he saw a shape. He pressed his face to the glass. It was Alice. Her face was pressed against the other side of the glass. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her hands were raw, and he could see the breath fogging the glass in ragged, desperate puffs. Asterisk. Thump, 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 asterisk. She was banging her shoe against the steel. "Alice, stand back!" He grabbed the combination wheel, spinning it. It was useless. A high-end, time-delayed lock. He couldn't crack it in days, let alone minutes. A beautiful design, is it not? Holmes's voice echoed from the top of the stone steps. He was descending slowly, carrying a lantern. He had removed his suit jacket and put on a heavy leather butcher's apron. A custom-built safe from the Diebold Company. Holmes continued, his voice conversational, as if discussing the weather. Advertised as fire and burglar-proof. They failed to mention sound and air-proof, an oversight I have found. Most useful. He set the lantern on the surgical table, illuminating the grim tools. How much air? Thomas demanded, his hands clenched at his sides. Holmes checked his pocket watch. She is a healthy young woman, but she is, shall we say, agitated. At her current rate of consumption, I'd wager 7 minutes, perhaps 8. You, on the other hand, have a more immediate problem. Holmes turned a large red wheel on the pipe manifold. A low, heavy times hiss times filled the cellar. It wasn't the sharp scent of cyanide. It was the familiar cloying smell of illuminating gas, the kind that lit the city's streets. The kind that, in a confined space, was explosive. A different sort of test, Mr. Flynn, Holmes said, picking up a heavy, long-bladed scalpel from the table. A question of physics. Can you solve the puzzle of the vault before the atmosphere in this room becomes incandescent? I have, of course, already lit the pilot in the furnace. Thomas's mind was a blur of calculations. The cellar's volume, the rate of gas flow, the location of the pilot light. He had maybe times 5 times minutes before the gas-to-air ratio reached its flashpoint. Holmes was toying with him. He wanted Thomas to fixate on the vault, to panic, to fail. Thomas did the last thing Holmes expected. He turned his back on the vault. He turned his back on his sister. He ran, full tilt, at the pipe manifold. Holmes, surprised for the first time, let out a bark of intrigued laughter. Yes, that's it! Engage with the machine, Mr. Flynn! Thomas wasn't engaging. He was hijacking. He knew this system. It was a standard, large-building gas and water main, perversely repurposed. He saw the main flow valve Holmes had opened. He saw the secondary lines. One, marked with a small F, clearly led to the furnace. Another, unmarked, led to the sealed room where Pitezel had gassed him. A third snaked directly times into times the furnace itself. Holmes was hunting him now, moving with a surgeon's grace, the scalpel held low. What will you do, engineer? Shut off the gas? A sound choice. But then, you still have the problem of the vault, and the problem of times me asterisk. Thomas grabbed the wheel for the furnace's times internal times gas line. He times cranked it open asterisk, all the way. The hissing in the room times lowered times as the pressure diverted. Now, raw, unlit gas was pumping by the cubic foot directly into the furnace's sealed combustion chamber. You're just feeding the flame! Holmes laughed, lunging. Thomas dodged, grabbing a heavy iron rod from the floor. He didn't swing it. He jammed it into the times, other times, wheel the main valve Holmes had opened, and times snapped it off asterisk, breaking the mechanism in the on position. The hissing returned to a roar. You've doomed us both, Holmes shouted, his composure finally cracking. He lunged again, the scalpel flashing. Thomas blocked with the iron rod. The clang of metal on metal echoed in the stone room. He was stronger than Holmes, but Holmes was faster, more precise. The doctor's blade sliced Thomas's forearm. Thomas ignored the pain. He backed away, not toward the stairs, but toward the furnace. The air is saturated, Doctor, Thomas yelled, his voice ragged. But you're a man of science. You know about vacuums. You know about pressure. He was at the furnace door. It was massive, black iron, with a heavy bar latch. This cellar will be an inferno, Thomas shouted, his hand on the latch. It's your only way out. The only place built to contain the flame. He was bluffing. The gas in the room was bad, but the gas times inside times the furnace, mixing with the pilot light, was a bomb. Holmes stopped. He was calculating. The engineer, his opponent, was telling him the truth. The fire, when it came, would be brief but total. A flash fire. The only thing in this room designed to withstand that kind of heat was the kiln itself. "You think to trap me?" Holmes sneered, but he was looking at the furnace. "I think to live," Thomas yelled. He looked past Holmes, at the vault, at Alice. She was slumped against the glass, her eyes closed. "She's gone," Thomas whispered, his voice breaking. "You've won. Just let me." He was acting, praying she was acting. The feigned despair was the final piece. Holmes saw a broken man, a failed hero, making one last, desperate, stupid move. "You first, Mr. Flynn," Holmes said, gesturing with the scalpel. "Open it. We shall wait out the fire together." "No," Thomas said. He looked at the pipe he had opened. I've changed my mind. I'm going to take you with me." He pulled a match from his pocket. It was the one variable Holmes hadn't controlled. Holmes's eyes widened. He saw the match. He saw the saturated air. He saw the iron rod in Thomas's hand. He saw the open furnace door, the only times shield. His logic, his arrogance, his entire psychopathic sense of self-preservation screamed at him. He bolted asterisk. He dove, head first, through the open door of his own crematorium. Thomas was on it before Holmes could turn. He slammed the heavy iron door. The sound was a deafening boom asterisk. He dropped the heavy bar latch, sealing it. Screaming erupted from inside. Muffled, furious banging. "You didn't pipe the gas to the room, Thomas!" Holmes shrieked, his voice tinny and distant. You, asterisk. "I piped it in times with you, asterisk," Thomas snarled. He didn't need the match. The pilot light was already in there. A low woomph shook the iron door. The bar strained. The screaming became a high, thin wail. And then, abruptly, it stopped. A wave of intense heat washed over Thomas's back. The furnace was now living up to its name. Thomas staggered, his arm bleeding, his lungs aching. He ran to the vault. "Alice! Alice!" She didn't move. He put his hands on the combination lock. He wasn't a safecracker. He was an engineer. He had designed these. He put his ear to the cold steel, his bloody fingers moving the dial. He wasn't listening for tumblers. He was feeling, for the transfer of motion. For the slight, infinitesimal change in friction as the gears aligned. Asterisk, click. HNNing. Clack. Asterisk. He was out of time. The furnace was roaring, the metal of it beginning to glow a dull cherry red. The stone around it was cracking. The fire was loose. He ripped his tension wrench from his pocket. He didn't pick the lock. He jammed the wrench into the dial, and tore it off the door. He jammed the pick deep into the exposed mechanism, finding the final lever, and forced it asterisk. There was a snap of breaking steel. The handle spun. He yanked the heavy door open. A cloud of foul, hot air rushed out. Alice fell into his arms, a dead weight. "No," he breathed. He slapped her face. "Alice, breathe. Damn you, breathe." He threw her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry and ran. The basement was an oven. The stairs were choked with black smoke. The fire was roaring up the chute he had come down, turning the entire building into a chimney. "Pitezel!" he yelled, but he knew the coward was long gone, or more likely, long dead. There was no way out. The stairs were a wall of flame. He saw it. The coal chute. The one he should have noticed on the way in. It was small, dark, and led up toward the street. He shoved Alice in first, pushing her up into the black, suffocating passage, and then scrambled in after her. He climbed, his arms and legs screaming, pushing her inert body ahead of him. Soot and cinders rained down. The chute became a kiln. He climbed until his muscles gave out, until the world was just blackness and heat and the smell of his sister's hair. He broke the surface. His head and shoulders burst through a metal plate on the sidewalk. He gasped, sucking in the cool, damp night air of Chicago. He was alive. He hauled Alice's body onto the pavement. She was pale, still, but as the fresh air hit her lungs, she gave a single, ragged, gasping cough. Her eyes fluttered open. Thomas collapsed beside her on the cobblestones, his body a constellation of pain. Behind them, the World's Fair Hotel was an inferno. Flames licked out of every window on every floor. The strange, impossible angles of the roofline collapsed inward. The walls, those impossible shifting walls, buckled. The crowd on the street watched, mesmerized by the spectacle. Fire wagons clanged in the distance. Alice grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thomas," she whispered, her throat raw. The eyes. "I know," he said, pulling her to her feet. "I know." He didn't look back at the fire. He didn't see the brick and mortar crumble, burying the surgical tables, the vats of acid, and the glowing iron furnace in a million tons of rubble. He didn't stay to tell the police. They wouldn't have believed him. They would have seen a logic-obsessed, dismissed Pinkerton ranting about moving walls and gas-filled rooms. He had not come to Chicago to be a hero. He had come to dismantle a trap. He put his arm around his sister, and together, the two of them limped away from the burning castle, disappearing into the anonymous, electric-lit crowds of the White City. They had not killed the monster, they had simply sealed him in the tomb he himself had built.